Today on the Family Answer Man, we're answering your questions about parenting from a biblical worldview on the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orges here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man himself. This time is designed to answer the questions commonly asked in both the counseling and church settings, and our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listeners, have a stronger, healthier, and happier family. We want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. Days Meat Market is located at 53770 LA Highway 16 in Denham Springs, Louisiana. Now, this show is not a therapy session, and it is not specific advice to your situations. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be and often are very complicated and dynamic. So, for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counseling specific to your unique circumstances. We hope that this episode of the Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. I'm David Orges, and I have a master's in professional counseling, 18 years in ministry, and I am married with 4 amazing kids. I'm here again, joined by Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man, who has his PhD in family psychology, a master's in clinical counseling, a master's of education in pastoral counseling and theology, and a master in law with a focus in family mediation. He is a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. Dr. Mark, welcome. We are glad to have you as the Family Answer Man, and as it has recently been the time for kids to go back to school, we have some questions that are appropriate for that topic as we look into what it looks like to parent from a biblical worldview. So today we'll start out the Family Answer Man program with this question that was written in. It says, my child is going into middle school and it is a constant struggle. I am getting tired. I'm getting frustrated. I am dreading each morning. What do you suggest?
Wow, that's a very large question, a lot to unpack there. And it's a good question. As a parent, it's a question we all have. If you've raised middle school kids, it's a difficult time. It is a challenging time. It's a joyful time in some ways, but also it's a challenge. As the old saying goes, the middle school years are the no man land years. I mean, those are some tough years because you're coming out of childhood, going into adolescence. A lot's happening physically, emotionally, psychologically, cognitively, intellectually with the child. And so they're just in a whirlpool of various challenges. And so middle school is a very tough and challenging time. So let me say this. I'll begin by saying that, first of all, parenting is the most important job you'll ever do. It doesn't matter how many cases you win, how many sermons you preach, or how many surgeries you perform. I will still argue that parenting is the most important job you will ever do. And so doing it well, doing it right, doing it to the best of our ability, I think is the greatest and most important thing we can do. It not only impacts the child, but it impacts, again, that child's future for the rest of their life. And so parenting is the most important job. Now, with that being said, I love what Dr. James Dobson once said. He said, parenting isn't for cowards. And so it requires courage. It requires creativity. It requires meeting the challenges of our kids. Now, the reality also is this. There's not a parent listening out there that, if we're going to be really honest, does not have some regrets. Looking back, I wish I would have done this differently. Many say, I wish I've done that differently. I wish I would have been more engaged, more attentive, more involved, more invested, and the list goes on. So we all have regrets. I mean, I have regrets as a parent. And so we all have these regrets. But again, what we have to understand is that the parenting philosophy of life and the parenting philosophy, in our generation, or in this generation, I should say, changed from maybe the last generation. And so it's important that we understand what our parenting philosophy is and to develop a parenting philosophy that, again, is one that works for your family and works for your children. So, parenting. Whenever I talk about parenting, I know someone is listening that's going to say, so what does he know about parenting? He doesn't know my situation. Does he even have kids? And so let me just begin by saying, first of all, I'm a parent. I've got 3 grown children in their 30s and 40s. And I will say this, my kids are not perfect, but they're great kids and they've done a lot of great things. By that, I mean this, they all finished college. They all have started their own businesses. They all are very accomplished in their business. They've all received accolades and rewards for their business. They have all been in ministry on a volunteer basis. And they've done well in their ministry, and they've all brought me some amazing grandkids. So again, they're not perfect. They've done well. And the reason why I say that is because, again, what I'm about to share with you are things that I've used, things that I've shared with others, and they've used. And these are some things that, again, I think are very, very important.
And so today you speak not only from having an unbelievable amount of education in this topic, but also from a lot of personal experience from your own children and grown children.
Exactly. In other words, what I'm sharing with you is not only what I've learned also, but a lot of things I'm sharing with you, I didn't read in a book, okay? A lot of things that I share with you, I actually had to understand, perform, and fine-tune in my own life and my own family. The first thing I would argue is this. Whenever you're dealing with your child, the most important thing that you can do as a parent, and this may sound very simplistic, but we forget this sometimes, is to create a relationship. And what I mean by that is this. We need to make sure that we have a relationship with our sons, our daughters, that we have an attachment, a connection. And what I mean by that is that so many times a parent sees themselves only as one who brings about external control. In other words, you do what I do because I tell you to do. You do what I do because if you don't do it, you will be punished. And I'm not saying there's not an element of that in some of our parenting, and there has to be to some degree. But eventually, as the child gets older, you need to create what's also called an internal control. Internal control basically means this. The child does what they do because they desire to please their parent. They desire to receive the blessing of their parent. They desire to get that compliment from their parent. They desire to have the approval of their parent. And the illustration I often use, and I use this illustration many times with my clients, is that go back in your memory, go back in time in your life when you're about 5 years old. And you're in a room full of family and relatives and friends. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon, and you're in this room, and you're sitting next to your mother. And in walks your mother's older sister. And she walks in, and your mother says to you, I want you to go hug your aunt. And you say, I don't want to. She's mean. She's ugly. She doesn't like me. And your mom says, if you don't go hug your aunt, I'm going to spank you. So what do? You get up, you go hug the aunt, right? You come back, you sit down. 5 minutes later, mom's younger sister walks in. She's sweet, she's pretty, she's always been nice to you. She buys you ice cream. She takes you to drive around in her car. She makes you feel all grown up. And when she walks in the room, immediately you get up and you go hug your aunt, your mom's younger sister. In both cases, here's my point. You got up and you hugged an aunt. One was out of external control. You better do this or else. The other was out of internal control. You wanted to because, again, you did it out of love. You did it out of desire. So the first thing is create a relationship whereby your child is wanting to do things like go to school, like make good grades, because there's something inside of them that wants to really please the parent. Number two, that's number one. Number two, you need to discover sometimes as a parent what's happening at school. There may be bullying going on. There may be some teasing going on. Sometimes parents are so busy and they're so caught up in their own world, their own life, that they don't hear or get the clues from their child as to what's going on in school. Bullying, teasing, maybe a teacher that for whatever reason does not appreciate what that child maybe brings to the classroom, so to speak. And so sometimes you need to figure out what's going on that is keeping my child from wanting to go to school. Number three, make sure that there's something about the school perhaps the child can enjoy. In other words, when I was in middle school, I wasn't crazy about school, but I loved playing football. Okay, so I went to middle school loving it, not so much school, but loving the fact that at the end of the day, I get to go and have football practice, and I get to play on the team, and I get to, play football. So maybe your child needs to discover what is it that it's out there in the school that they could be a part of that would make them feel a connection. Band, sports, theater. And if there is nothing, create something. And here's what I've seen over the years. For example, we had one family created an FCA chapter. And this audience will know the FCA means Fellowship of Christian Athletes. But their son created an FCA chapter. He got a group of his friends from church. They started meeting before school. Sometimes they would meet after school. They got the FCA organization on board, started holding rallies, started holding prayer meetings, started holding Bible studies. They had some big names from football teams, from college, and even the pros come in and speak and that sort of thing. And they really enjoyed that, and it made school almost a ministry for them, even though they weren't crazy about pre-algebra. They were crazy about the fact that, hey, this is an avenue for me to meet some athletes and to be with my friends and to do something for the Lord.
That's really interesting. A couple of weeks ago, you had talked about finding the one thing in marriage and how that helps a husband and a wife connect and build that connection, that positive relationship there. It's real similar to, it sounds like what you're saying with helping your kids find the one thing maybe at school that they like that actually helps them form a connection with their time at school and helps create a positive relationship with school.
Even 50 years ago, that really dates me, so okay. Even 50 years ago, when I was in middle school, we were allowed to create during the off-season football season a martial arts or karate program, whereby I could be a part of that. My dad was a part of that, in doing some teaching, if you will, in the off season. Various karate moves and things of that nature that would help with coordination and all that, which really intensified my desire to go to school, even though, again, I hated pre-algebra and Texas history and all that at that time. But that gave me a sense of belonging, a sense of connection. Another thing that parents need to be aware of is that public school life may not be for every child. Sometimes the school is overwhelming. Sometimes the classrooms are too large. Sometimes maybe their friends aren't going to their particular school. So maybe a smaller private school may be a better fit. Or in some cases, homeschool may be a better fit. The bottom line is this. Sometimes we need to kind of understand where our child is, understand what fits them best, and understand maybe that this public school setting may not be the best setting for them. Maybe a private school, maybe even homeschool. Bottom line, sometimes the child needs to understand that, look, I have a job to do as a parent. I go to work every day. You have a job, and your job is to go to school. And sometimes you need to sit down in a very matter-of-fact, one-on-one, hey, look, I understand how you feel, but this is just how the world works, and help them to realize I have a job to do, and so do you. Another thing a parent can do is get involved in the school. Maybe mom or dad or whomever can get involved maybe with the athletics, or get involved with one of the teachers, or maybe be of some help in that regard. And then also get involved, mom and dad, with the kids' homework. Help them find that niche, that area of interest. I love the story of Dr. Ben Carson, whose mom, who could not read, and for those who don't know Dr. Ben Carson, he is perhaps the greatest pediatric neurosurgeon the world has ever known. But his mom made sure that every week Dr. Carson, or Ben at that time, it wasn't Dr. Carson, but Ben at that time as a middle school kid, would read 2 books every week and do book reviews. Well, as he did that, he became more knowledgeable. And when the teacher would ask questions about certain topics, he had the answer. And he went from the back of the class to the head of the class, if you will. Went on and got scholarships, went to medical school, became the greatest pediatric neurosurgeon the world has ever known, all because he found a niche in reading. He found a niche in, therefore, learning and the knowledge that he gained, and he felt more confident about being in school. And the rest of the story is he becomes the greatest pediatric neurosurgeon the world has ever known.
That's such a cool story, too,
Yeah.
because his mom was illiterate, didn't know how to read.
Right.
She would make him submit the written book reports and then give an oral report because she couldn't read
Right.
the submitted
Exactly.
written book report.
And then she later on goes and gets a college degree herself.
Right.
Years later.
How incredible.
Yeah. So again, the main thing is, I guess the takeaway from this question is, part of helping your child do well in school, sometimes you have to get involved in their world. And we said that,
That's right.
in one of our programs with spouses. It's also true with our kids. You got to get involved in their world.
There's a great quote that I love, and I think it's originally credited to Catherine Wallace, and she said that if you don't listen eagerly in the little stuff when they're little, I have a first grader, second grader, third grader, and a preschooler. And so if you don't listen to the little stuff when they're little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they're big, because to them, it's always been big stuff.
Right.
And it's been difficult, for me in my own life to stop sometimes in the middle of the chaos with, 4 little kids and listen to the little things intently as if they are the big things. But I know that's one thing that I focus on to try to, like you said, build that relationship and that connection to invest in the future. So my kids will talk to me when they're older.
And I know we have a lot of pastors who listen to this program, and I thank God for the pastors. But one of the great concerns that I hear from both pastors and the child of pastors is that, my dad, or in some cases even my mom, do not take the time for me because the church is so demanding and the challenges are so great that somewhere, some way, somehow, we don't mean to, but the child, does not have the attention or the affection or the adoration from their dad or from their mom that they so desire. And sometimes as pastors, we forget that. Sometimes as pastors, we, don't understand that, oh my goodness, 5 years has gone by or 5 months has gone by, and I have not thrown a football with my kid. We have not gone to a movie. We haven't gone camping. We haven't, gone fishing or whatever it may be. And that child so needs and desires that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important. Reggie Joyner says all the time, it's time over time is how you invest in your child.
Oh, no doubt.
It's just spending time with your kids over a long period of time.
Right.
And I think that's so great. So, thank you for that answer, Dr. Mark. I think that's a lot of really good insight and advice for especially the middle school parents in such a challenging and can be, like you said, kind of wandering out in the wilderness season for these precious young kids. So, Family Answer Man, question number 2 for today. In the same vein of parenting comes in and says, our kids are 8 and 10 years old, so similar age group here. It says they're really starting to argue and push back. Sometimes they cause a scene in public, which is every parent's shared experience and nightmare. What do I do?
How many times have we been at a store and all of a sudden a child just really becomes extremely, shall we say, irritated and aggravated, throws a tantrum, and poor mom's not quite sure what to do, and everyone is looking at her like, what are you going to do with your child? Or maybe even in church, for example, we've seen that, right? Where a child, just now all of a sudden just erupts in the middle of the service, and the parent is embarrassed and not quite sure what to do, and so the list could go on. And so every parent has been there to some degree. But when you have an 8 and 10-year-old, they are starting to reach a stage of development, that preteen, where they're starting to begin to form their own opinions. They're starting to form their own, shall we say, schedule of what they're wanting to do, when they want to come in, when they want to take their bath, when they want to go to bed. They're starting to want to establish some of that. And so the first thing I say to parents is this: you must establish yourself as the authority. You must establish yourself as the leader, or put another way, you must establish yourself as the coach. There's a proverb that we love to share in Proverbs 22. It says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart from it. And a lot of people look at that scripture and they say, well, yeah, bring your child to church, and when their child gets older, they keep going to church, and we kind of use it in that vein. That's not necessarily what that scripture is pointing to, even though that may have something to do with it. But that word train would also be used in our vernacular as the word coach. And what I mean by that is this: as a parent, as a coach, your child is not equal to you. And that's something that a lot of parents forget. And what happens is that when that child begins to argue with that parent, when that child begins to talk back to that parent, when that child begins to say things that are very disrespectful to that parent, what that child is trying to say, or maybe even establish, is we're equals. Every good athlete knows I'm not equal to my coach. And every good coach knows that those athletes are not equal to the coach. And so my point is this, is that you as a parent must be the coach. And what a coach will always do, a coach will always establish the rules. The coach will always establish the requirements. The coach will always define the terms. I think one of the great mistakes a lot of parents made, and I know that I'm sure I made this mistake, and I know my dad made this mistake, was they will give some requirement. I want you to do this or that. And the child's not sure what that means. So in coaching terms, for example, in basketball terms, for example, if a coach says to a player who's never played basketball, give me 20 free throws. Well, what's a free throw? What does that even mean? And so what the coach has to do is say, here's the line, there's the basket, here's the ball. Here's what a free throw looks like. Do this 20 times and let's see how you do. So a coach, in other words, defines the terms. A coach demonstrates what they're looking for. So when a parent says to a child, hey, clean up your room, what does that even look like? What does that even mean? You know, if a parent says to a child, I want you to clean off the table or whatever, or wash the dishes. Okay, we as parents know what that means.
That's a great point.
But if you're 7, 8, 9, or 10, your understanding of cleaning up a room or washing a dish may be
drastically different.
You know, I mean, you may give it to Fido to lick the plate, and to him, the plate looks clean to me. So the point is that a coach defines the term. A coach demonstrates what they're looking for. A coach then gets involved. I've never seen a good coach say, okay, guys, okay, you know, girls, go out there and here's a ball and here's a court and just do your thing. They get involved. They establish what is necessary and they practice and they practice and they practice. If you want your child to do well in school, sometimes you may have to practice with your child. Look, when the teacher says this, here's what I want you to do. Let's practice it. Or when you go into a restaurant and you sit down and the waiter comes to you and says, how may I help you? This is what you say. Let's practice that. Or whatever. Or if we're going to go to someone's home and they say, hi, Johnny, hi, Susie, here's how you're to respond to them. Let's practice that. Coaches, again, create rehearsal or practice time so that when the situation comes, the athlete, the student, the child is now comfortable. This requires, and you said it well a while ago, this requires time. And I will argue this, and you were saying this, I think, alluding to this, kids spell love T-I-M-E.
Yes.
Kids spell love T-I-M-E. And the more time you spend, the more they realize how much they're loved, the greater rapport you establish, the greater the results you're going to have. One other little quick thing is on this, you know, a lot of parents feel like, you know, when my kids start arguing or whatever, or they start talking back, I'm going to, you know, put one more up on them by yelling louder.
Ooh.
Minimize your yelling. And if you can stop the yelling altogether, please do. The reason why is that eventually children tune out yelling, and eventually children see yelling as nothing more than you are losing control. And so minimize yelling, maximize what I call powwows. One of the great things we did at our home as our kids were growing up was we had these powwows. And a powwow basically is defined as you sit maybe in the living room or around the kitchen table, keep it very comfortable, keep everything low key, keep everything very light, but you let them know this is what's going on. This is what I'd like to see. These are my concerns. These are what I'm hoping will change. Here's what I'm hoping will be different. 7 to 10 minutes max. And it's not a lecture. And dads who are listening out there, one of our great temptations is we start repeating ourselves. We said what we wanted to say, and then we say it again. And we say, and then we say it again. And then we say it again. And we keep repeating ourselves. And by the third time you repeat yourself, your kid's tuned out. Don't ask me how I know this, okay? but they're tuned out. And so, but say it one time, say it in a calm, cool voice, let them know what you're wanting, and then let it go. A couple more things is this. As your child begins to listen to what you're saying, as they begin to hear what you're saying, as they begin to do what you're saying, give them those goals, give them those rewards as they're meeting those goals. Reward them for what they're doing, but also letting them know, again, what the consequence may look like. And what a consequence may be is find that thing in their life that is really important to them. And if they're yelling and embarrassing you, you take this away. Now stay with me. You take this away and you say to them, if you can go 3 to 5 days without talking back, if you can go 3 to 5 days without being disrespectful, if you can go 3 to 5 days without yelling back or whatever, you can have this thing back. But you're going to have to go 3 to 5 days without that. And by that, they're not just doing time. And they're learning that, hey, I can change my behavior. So if a child is saying things, doing things, embarrassing you in public, number one, stop the show. Stop the show. If you're in the middle of Walmart and they go into a tantrum, or you're in the middle of church, they go into a tantrum, you stop the show. You bring them outside and you go home. Number two, you disengage. In other words, you let them know, I don't like this. I don't like what you just did. I don't like it. And then you disengage. You don't wait for them to give, their rebuttal. You don't wait for them to give their reason why they did it. You don't give, you just simply say, I don't like that. And then you disengage. You don't ask them why they're doing it. If you ask them, why did you do this? It's going to validate why they did it or their reason behind it. You don't go there. You just discover, again, what is meaningful to them. You remove it. You give them a 3 to 5 days to change their behavior. And then you begin to, again, give it back to them as their behavior begins to change. Sometimes you may want to get another adult on board, such as a coach or a teacher or an instructor. Maybe say to them, look, she's really going through, all of this. Please help me to reinforce the power and the importance of respecting the authority that I'm trying to display, as well as what you're trying to display. Again, giving blessing, giving them opportunity. Bottom line is this: we train our children, we train other people how to treat us. And that is a constant, lifelong journey, whether it be in work, whether it be among our kids, whether it be with our spouse, whether it be with our siblings, whoever it may be. But we're constantly training people how they can treat us. And this is powerful, and this is important in the life of our child.
That's fantastic. That last phrase, that we train people how to treat us, and putting in that context with our kids is, I think, a great way to wrap up that advice that you gave for especially the 8 to 10-year-olds who are, they're going through puberty. They still have baby teeth, and it's hard to think of that sometimes and remember that. But those are the things that are important to remember. And like you said, to be not just a coach, but use the phrase a good coach is going to do these things. And for parents, it's being
get involved,
a good coach.
Define the terms, let them know, show them, demonstrate what you're wanting, and then rehearse it. That's powerful.
We're so thankful. Dr. Mark, the Family Answer Man, thank you so much for joining us today. We want to thank all of the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Again, Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs. It services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas, and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats is located at 35770 LA Highway 16, North Denham Springs in Watson. And as a reminder, this is not a therapy session, nor is this advice specific to your situation. Mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be and are often very complicated and dynamic. And for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your circumstances. We do hope that you will reach out to us at the Family Answer Man at loumc.org or soundradioinfo@milldale.org with your questions. We would love to hear from you, to answer your questions. We have gotten feedback. We know that people have appreciated this show already, and we want to make a difference for you so that you can make a change that'll lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family here from the Family Answer Man program.